Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's August 24th, 2024. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank the Ann Arbor Film Festival for booking our guest today. That's where I met him, but I knew him somehow through Will Erickson too. That's cool too. But it's a real honor and a pleasure to celebrate his birthday too. Mike Woods, M. Where in the heck you calling in from, man?
I'm coming from Chicago, Illinois, and it's a privilege to be here. Much love.
How cool. First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Wow. I think the best thing for a human being is an understanding of consciousness, an understanding of the self that can only be acquired once the self manages to understand the bizarre and absurd relationship between the self that's reflexive and the self that is the subject. And that through that kind of understanding, through that kind of direct self-reflexivity, is born what Kierkegaard would call despair, but from which one may have a deeper understanding of the kind of infinite structures that we find ourselves in kind of absurd juxtaposition to.
Right. That was deep, dude. You anticipate everything we're going to talk about. What is your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Oof. My favorite form of information is musical.
Wow, that's good. I don't get that often.
I think that there's so many streams of information. I'm a person who's neurodivergent, so I oftentimes find highly stimulating environments to numb my brain. And I'm also thinking of music in sort of the context of, I guess, what Plato speaks of and the Republic, in the sense of the musical and the poetic, and how they speak to all senses at once, and even the verbal, but without necessarily directly involving words. So there's something to the way in which I try to also hold information in the musical and the rhythmic. Rhythm is an interesting way, for instance, because all of our information is stored in a bizarre rhythm of clock timing in a computer, for instance, in the digital sense. But there's also the innate information that gives us the sense of what rhythm is and what that cycle is.
Dude, we're going to get into rhythm, but I got to tell you, I always loved, I talked to Captain Beefheart 52 times in 1991. He called me in the middle of the night. It's an amazing experience in my life, and he was a big influence on me. And he goes, I want to break, he didn't say it in this, but in interviews, he says, I want to break that mama heartbeat. So we get rhythm from our mom's heartbeat. Is that 4/4 rhythm, or is that like going out into, Sun Ra, Cecil Taylor realms, or is it like boom, boom, boom? And so rhythm is so much part of our life. And he was like, I want to break that. And that one of the greatest moments also in my life was when my sister was a cheerleader. And she said, we got to come up with new beats. So she would take an empty soup can and throw it down the steps.
That's amazing.
And hear how it hit. Bump, 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 like ding, 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 ding. And then my friend played with a Beefheart guy, Morris Tepper or something. He goes, play drums like a drunken sailor.
That's it.
And so that's funny because we're so dependent on rhythm being, on time.
Yep.
But you stressing rhythm just opened up the floodgate. That was amazing. I love this. You start right up. Well, I'll quote Kierkegaard, now I'll quote Plato. now, but I would say, and then that neurodiversion thing, that was heavy. So, well, we'll get into all that. But the next question is why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Oof. Okay. Before I had real quick, I got that one. I just
Yeah.
also put one point on what you said just before is
Yeah.
Jay Dilla and I'm a hip hop producer as well, and I
Yeah.
really started my artistic career in many ways, making beats, and a good amount of that is like, yeah, they say Jay Dilla at his best, he turned off the quantize, the automatic um, structure that sets the beats to a strict grid based pattern for the rhythm, whether it be, like if it's 4/4, then it sets it to the 16th notes or the eighth notes, for instance, and it
But you mean
automatically
just to clarify him, you mean on a drum
on a
machine,
drum machine.
he would set it instead of 4/4 on 16th notes
No,
or
instead of making
to
it so
randomize it?
he would make it so that when he played it, right, that
Yeah,
it would be off grid. So it would not lay the button press down immediately at the exact 16th note or where the beat was, but purposefully he would go off beat a bit. And it's
that's
that off
amazing.
beatness that gives the funk the groove to
Yeah,
it. You have to know what's the perfect amount of offbeat to be. And then because you're using samples as well, there's an offbeatness to both the way that it attacks and hits at the beginning and
yeah.
then the way that it dissipates at the end of it. But anyway, we'll go back to that, but that's amazing.
But
Um,
let me react to that for a
yeah,
second because I produce funk songs, like The Meters,
yeah,
and that's what
yeah,
Ziggy
meters.
Lou as a drummer is he's doing this little I actually you gotta listen to if you've never heard Art Ensemble of Chicago,
Oh,
Theme to Yo-Yo. Do you
yeah.
know Theme to Yo-Yo?
I don't know if I know that one, but I
Oh,
know
you
Art
got look
Ensemble.
it up when we're done on YouTube. Yeah, and I sampled or looped the first part of it, and it's the funkiest shit. I've tried to get the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Bone Daddies and all these funk groups to play it over the years. I've played them a lot of times, but this really solid bass player, he was playing. I goes, "Okay, we're gonna play this loop over and over, and you're gonna play to it." And he goes, dude, that drummer is not he's doing a little offbeat there. It's not totally funk drumming, you
Yeah.
know. And so that's it. Funk is that little skip that you're not aware of, but you think it's 4/4-ish, but it's really just like a little off or Tower of Power, all these great drummers, they're just like whoop, but you don't notice it. It's
That's it.
such
I mean, that's it. That's it.
yeah,
Exactly. That's why
yeah,
Punky Drummer is so
yeah,
like used as a sample too.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. It's
what was that other question that you had?
Yeah, so the question this is good because you gotta realize that I am after tangents, stories, anecdotes. So
Oh,
you don't have to answer the question, but they're mainly there for prompts. But the question is there's 3 questions on information, basically. The second one is, why do humans collect or gather information?
now, okay, this is interesting because I can only come to this from the perspective of my from an autobiographical perspective. My mother was born in Costa Rica and she came to the United States at the age of 5, 6, but she had been in a convent essentially before that in Costa Rica. And um, her experience was awful from what I can tell and what she is willing to disclose. And she's a woman who hides a lot of her trauma as being a tough person. So she thinks, oh, then, that well, let's not cry about it. Let's not worry about that. But truth of the matter is, her own acquisition of information, of language, was both self defense within the standpoint of a Latina who did not speak English, who could not pass as white in the suburbs of Long Island. Um, and I think that what she taught to me was that I needed to take on all the information in my um, sphere as much as possible, the information that seems to matter, right? And what that was, I had to develop over time, as a means of, maybe counteracting some of the things that she knew that I was also going to come up against. As a person who's had my own mental and physical health, difficulties in my life too, her that I've seen that, and then I say that however, people use information and systems of information as well as, lexicons and hidden lexicons as a means of storing power and of keeping power relations. For instance, otherwise there would be no reason, why the judicial system has very strict, rules, protocols, even, um, the speech
Yeah,
the nomenclature, all of those things in filmmaking as well are
yeah,
meant to, keep within a private or a more private group a wealth of information that would otherwise capitalize, if for others if it was
yeah.
democratized. So I think that in many ways it's about hoarding, value and power.
Yeah, what you are so great. That's like, I did a lecture before a Zappa show last night in a Masonic temple.
Oh wow.
And Mozart, I was saying Mozart did the magic flute, and it's all about because Joyce hung out with the Masons and then revealed their secrets in the wake.
Oh wow.
And that's why you dig this. That's why the CIA invented MK Ultra through Finnegan's Wake.
No way.
Yeah,
Okay.
and actually, you got to meet our friend who does PhD at Stanford on that.
That's amazing. I would love to.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's amazing, and the MI5 guys, and they read the Wake to study it. But it sounds kooky conspiracy, but it's like, oh yeah, the Masons are not pissed at Joyce because they can't even read Finnegan's Wake. It's like, what the fuck is this? But the Mozart, the Masons knew that Mozart put shit in the magic flute opera about their secrets, and the theory is they killed them. So again, it sounds like a kooky conspiracy, and it might be, but who knows if the Masons bumped Mozart off? That is,
That's amazing. So I
yeah,
never knew that at
I
all.
know.
But if you look at my movie Body Prop, it has a
Yeah.
lot of that built into it in the first movement. It's called Destroyed Be Forever, All the Bonds of Nature, from the aria of the witch in
Yeah.
the magic flute. So it's
Yeah.
like
Oh, really?
really.
Really? But back to your answer, to hoard power? That says, why do humans collect information? To hoard power. Was that kind of your summary?
I think it's yeah, it's
Yeah.
the hoard power, and I think in some if just for some people that's also self defense, like
Yeah.
and therefore it should be seen, but especially where I find that
Yeah.
information, for instance, trade secrets, right,
Trade
or anything like that.
secrets. That's a good way to put it. Here's the other one you'll love. My favorite. W.C. Fields is reading the Bible. And they go, dude, why are you reading the Bible? He goes, I'm trying to find the loopholes. So that's what you're saying. With information, we can find the loopholes. We,
Actually,
we don't have
speaking
to be
of,
Wow. We don't have to be controlled by those hoarding the power. We can flip it and decode it. That's why McLuhan, what he did was he broke the Finnegan's Wake code. But all the Joyceans go, no, he didn't. He can't break the Finnegan's Wake. But he did. I mean, in a way, he did. He
I need to
realized.
read more on that. Like that's
Yeah.
actually I've only cracked open the book and tried to listen to an audiobook that was available on UbuWeb for a long time. So I
Yeah.
downloaded most of
But
the
no,
things.
here's the key is you have to read it out loud
Yeah,
with a group of people.
that's what I've heard. Yes.
In a living organism. So then you get it, because what he did was he invented Zoom, he invented the internet, he invented what's going to be after the internet and disguised it as a book.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that's what he did was it's unbelievable in a way. And then that's like, oh well, that's just your interpretation. So people can use it, like you said, almost in self-defense.
Yeah, that's
They can,
amazing.
they can use it in some people can hijack it and buy BMWs because they write books on trying to explain Finnegan's Way. Hey, all the power to them.
Yeah.
You know, and who else can and then today I was reading, one guy says it was just a leg pull. Joyce was just fucking with people. And it's like, yeah, so what? For 17 years he fucked with people.
He
All the
fucking with himself too. That's
if
that's
and all the power to him. I mean, that's what political, that's what Lenny Bruce did. That's what Abby Hoffman did. You know, Abby Hoffman's biggest influence was McLuhan because he says, oh, we can, or like, this guy said it all in San Francisco. He just died. I forgot his name. He's a Buddhist comic. He says, if you don't like the news, go make your own.
yeah.
Just make your,
Well,
I'm
I'm
all for those.
I'm 100 with that.
My
Absolutely.
my my art friends hate that those women threw soup at the Mona Lisa. It's like there's a protector on it. They know they're not ruining the art, and then they got their picture in the paper, and then made people go, oh, why did they do it? Oh, because they want to help Mother Nature. Okay, well, we heard that. You don't do it that way. It's like, nope, they weren't one. And the other one is Weather Underground.
Yes.
They are my heroes because they got Walter Cronkite to work for them. So they would blow up a building and he'd go, today the middle of the underground blew up a building and this is why they blew it up. And he's reading their manifestos like, fuck, it works.
Yep. And then Bernadine and Bill Ayers got away free, scot-free.
Oh,
And the end.
yeah. But I've interviewed Bill with all these questions. I like Bill a lot.
Oh, that's amazing. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and Bernadine has Alzheimer's now, I think.
Oh,
So
no, that's
it's sort of
lovely.
sad. But anyways, I imagine he was he was there in the streets in Chicago last week. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
well, I was, and it was
Yeah, well,
very
I know you were. You're my
oh
hero.
my.
Okay, so now the third information question is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented by humans?
Mm. I think that part of oof, that's a good one. Our organic just composition is to seek information. The way consciousness works is to essentially constantly negate what's in front of it. Like if we take the Sartre formulation and being in nothingness, for instance,
Yeah.
that's where that work in particular. I mean, McLuhan as well. Obviously, when talking about that, I think of McLuhan and Bojar as a group of theorists who very much take a lot of the formulations of this nothingness and
Yeah.
expand upon it with media in mind. But
Yeah.
Sartre's initial sort of formulation is that, right, we must constantly question, and the act of questioning is negation, and it creates value assessments or assessments of the space that we occupy, and in order to allocate ourselves as being here, we're constantly negating the external. So there's this other aspect of it where we're almost destined to negate things. The question ends up being, are we seeking information in good or bad faith, I think? And because seeking information is essentially the same as through this idea as negating that which is in order to arrive at a better understanding of everything.
Wow.
So I think that there is part of it is an innate function, and then what is learned is how to use the faculties of what should be in earnest pursuit of the being that is around us, that's actually absurd and miraculous, to take that and to then instead use the faculties of consciousness to pursue inventions of humanity, which are often built or saturated in this form of nihilism, when our pursuits become so interested in the sort of metafictions of human reality, that's, I think, where we're going beyond the the say the stated goal of our consciousness to begin with,
Yeah.
which is to say also maybe and I think we see this play out in all aspects of natural um, order, is that there's a lot of shit that just that occurs because possible the physical reality presents enough possibilities to sometimes be in disorder and evil, or whatever value we want to associate with evil. And evil is oftentimes given the value of destruction or decay, or a change in state that we determine to be worse than that which preceded it. In good faith, we can say that that is true also. But from the standpoint of something outside of human reality, we may in fact just see things change, that there is a state of change that occurs between different places within time space. So I do think that there is, it's important to point out, I think, that within despair is an innate sadness that is earnest, that potentially also binds us all together in love and suffering,
Yeah.
and that is not necessarily a bad
Okay.
aspect of it, you know.
Really, you are so articulate. I really love the way you talk, and it helps me understand. The one thing it really, remind me of is John Waters rooted for the Wicked Witch in Wizard of
Oh, that's
Oz.
amazing.
No,
Yes.
no, yeah, no, like, well, he turned out okay. I mean, he's a sick puppy. He's a great artist, blah blah blah. But it's like, whoa, like I mean, you don't do that. You root for I mean, some people, but like, no, that's evil. You don't root for evil. But anyways, the other one you said, the other one you said that really got me was McLuhan's line. Word is the most addicting and universal drug.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
we're addicted to words and we don't even know we invented them. They're fucking inventions made up because I study etymology every day. And my favorite is when it says of unknown origin. It's like every word is of unknown origin. It's just some linguist in an office could trace it back and goes, I think it came from here. And you know where all the coolest words come from? The
Hmm.
back alleys in London, the hoodlum slang.
That's
So
true.
talk about bad. Oh, well, they're the bad guys, and they created the coolest words we use.
That's right. Well, I mean, even I have a part in the Oxonia Photographa, this one series, right? Where I look at the etymology of a street right across from St. Mary's Cathedral at Oxford, right? And I would see it every day. This street's called Grove Street, right? It
Yeah,
used to be called Great Grope C Street, right? The I'll say Grope Cunt, right?
yeah,
And that was right next to a very well-known, infamous brothel called Kybald's Twitchin, right? So
yeah,
what would happen is after church, these folks would go down to Grope Cunt, and they would go to the Kybald's Twitchin, literally down the street. And it shows you the kind of the real roots of it, how crass people, human beings are always crass, and then putting on occasional generational plays that are
right.
like let's say
You mean
ways
like
in which.
Lautremont and Rabelais and Pasolini and all those guys? Like,
Oh,
whoa!
yeah, that's exactly right, right? Looking at
No,
Pasolini's
my
Trilogy
favorite
of
is
Life, that's
yeah,
perfect, that's it.
my favorite is Buñuel. He's like
Yeah.
so highly regarded. He's my favorite filmmaker by far, and he
Oh, very
has
cool.
hoodlums beating up why it's poor blind dudes, and it's like, wow, you really shouldn't be doing that. It's like, oh, but then the film is alluring. What he did by doing that, he's like, we're going to get into Buñuel too, but that was really
Most
good.
definitely.
Okay, so now, do thoughts create emotions?
Oh my god. Yes, I mean, they do, because I know that, and I'll say this again from kind of from the personal perspective. I've always been somebody who has had very strong emotions, like my my personal diagnoses are post-traumatic stress disorder, and I've been diagnosed on and off as either being bipolar or borderline, but my own mental health symptoms don't necessarily always go by the strict definitions that they give. So it's been difficult to actually get full diagnosis of my mental health. Only to say that what I can say is that I have sometimes floods of emotion, my emotion, especially the sad ones. And it's not depression, because it can drive my thoughts manic, and it creates a lot of my artwork in some ways too. And the ways that I've been able to manage that are with thinking patterns that really are much more helpful, and dialectical behavioral therapy, things like that. But it's also, I'll say, um, when I was in NYU for my undergrad, I studied under Professor Robbins, Lee Robbins, who was a Jungian psychoanalyst, and she taught emergence of the unconscious. And we read Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, among other things. But Jung describes the creative madness, and she also helps to expand upon it. That sometimes there is that period where consciousness is being guided through existence in ways that the synchronicities just pop up all too much. You're guided often by the artistic vision that you might have, for instance. And I think that there's so much in art right now that's beginning to try and mimic the design world or other worlds where the normies have essentially functional or corporate control, that we have essentially tossed aside those folks who do operate as like satellites, as visionaries. And McLuhan says the artist is that who elucidates the invisible structures of society. And so it's the artist that's not in the fad or not in the trend. In fact, I found that very difficult to even figure out what fad or what trends are. As an artist, we're constantly forced in many ways to be disjointed and see things from that perspective. So we were able to elucidate those structures much easier as a result.
That is so articulate because, and you're like anticipating the, 4 questions and 6 questions up. You're hitting them now, and it's good because but that's like, I have this big thing about who invented mental illness, because back years before they says, "Oh, that guy's nuts," they would go, "He's that person's the shaman of the town."
That's right. That's right.
you know and then they go, in the Marshall's line is so good: "You can't prove you're sane unless you have discharge papers from a mental hospital." And my friend goes, "Dude, I got them in their
Yeah.
see, I'm sane. Look, on my wall it says I was discharged."
Oh yeah. Yeah, you gotta talk to UK Health about that.
Yeah. And we just that's why I live in Venice, California, because everybody's normal on the Venice boardwalk. Like, that's where you can really get in touch
That's
with
it.
that a millionaire movie director next to a wino street junkie, and you can't tell the difference.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
the
Sometimes there
whole
is no
thing.
difference. Sometimes
Yeah,
the
there is. Right, right. And so, fill in the blank. I
Right.
don't know what I think until I.
Oh man. I don't know what I think until I until I search.
Wow, no one uses that word. Okay, McLuhan says, "I don't know what I think until I say it."
Yeah, I was about to say
Uh,
express.
Joan Didion says, "I don't know what I think until I write it." Most people are saying, over my 40 years asking these questions, are saying, "I don't know what I think until I experience it or,
Mm,
do it, some sort of active. I'm part of it."
yeah.
But, one recently was, "I don't know what I think until I wake up," or, there's been some good ones, but I don't get the word search very often. That was good. Now,
Very cool.
can humans think without language?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I
yeah.
think that as a bilingual person too, my Spanish gets rougher at periods of time, but when I'm in Ecuador with my grandmother for long periods of time, it hits. And yeah, I think all my thoughts far. In fact, actually, this is just my interest. At NYU when I was 21 years old, I think I was working as a camera operator for a lecture, and Noam Chomsky was there. And so Noam was, basically rattling off everything about neurolinguistics to a room of folks who had any question. He was just like for days he could just go off the top of his head, of course. And at the end we got to talking about of course, or just the origin of language and what's a possibility of actually exploring further, and whose work. And I asked him directly about Jung, and then he allowed me to email him. And despite the fact that he's got so many issues with the French theorists and whatnot. With Jung, he as a, I mean, not French theorist, but you get me. His as somebody who could potentially be seen as a much more philosophical figure towards the end of his life as well. He Chomsky was interested in simply the etymology used in the dream theory, which is so essential to his work. So I think that there's something to um, how that the image, right, plays with the language. But very much like you were talking about before, right, what forces us to speak. And you start to see this as a person who, in my high school days and my whole movie situation speaks about this, did a lot of drugs, and LSD in particular, is when your language faculties break down, you are an almost an infant trying to get the words out, trying to get the feelings and expressions out into the world. And maybe that's actually the only thing that does spark language. All of our language is just this like feeling, almost like a
Yeah,
constipation of ideas that
yeah.
must come out, and otherwise it just doesn't feel good. Like McLuhan's saying, right? We're not only addicted to the words, we're just addicted to the speaking of the words too. Or
Word
express.
is. That's amazing. First of all, that was so incredible, Em, because you definitely have ESP. The next question is addressing each other. I mean, literally the next question. So that was amazing. But couple things you said is T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. So you're trying to out that, you
Yeah.
know. And here's the I'm going to go off on a tangent because I want to ask you this question because it came up in the news in the last couple months. Can a baby dream inside the womb, or is dreaming need experience in the world?
Ooh.
So, I mean, your hunch or guess on that, because that's like, we know when the baby's out of the womb and it starts babbling, is it
Yep.
thinking? That's when people go, well, humans can think without language. Is the baby actually thinking? I think the baby's going, yeah, I see these eyes. And when I look at those eyes, that means milk. And man, I'm after it. You know, they might not like be falling in love with their mother. They're falling in love with her smile and her eye contact, the gaze, because it's about to give you some milk. You
Absolutely.
know? And so, I mean, that's, that's like called unconditional love, but is it really? Is this like people who love their cats? It's like, yeah, your cat doesn't love you. They don't have the word love, but yes, they do. Yeah, because you're opening up a can of cat food.
That's right.
But we don't know. We want to believe there's some human emotion going through another creature. But your guess or hunch, can you dream inside the womb?
So I actually went, this is a really interesting one. Anne Marie, my daughter,
Yeah.
recently started talking about this, that she says that she had an experience of pre-birth, she thinks. And I was
Yeah.
like, wait, what? She said, yeah, she had a dream about it. She had a dream that she could feel things within a period of time before she was born, and that she's sure that she remembers some glimpses of the day she was born. Now, I would say that obviously, I even have weird early memories. My memories begin very early, 3, 4 years old. I have some, and in bizarre kind of flickers. And I think that what happens, just like our consciousness after a dream, is we begin to work to in that process of reclamation, right, of the full memory when there's holes in it. And so the mind plays tricks on us. Uh,
Yeah.
I would say that one, whether or not we can experience within that womb what I think that's an interesting idea, and I think that is probable. But I'd be more interested to understand when you're born at all. For instance, if you and your existence essentially flows a sort of infinite chain, a cause of causal events. Um, I'm also thinking maybe there's a kind of sense that consciousness even predates your existence as separate ovum and sperm, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe there's something inherent
Yeah.
within that as well. There's also people who believe, like, for instance, consciousness is and how we associate what consciousness is to different systems. Maybe there's systems of low level consciousness like this book, but that this book actually still is an input output system, and maybe that's all consciousness is.
Yeah.
And so there's an interesting a provocation there. I would say though, on this other principle of like uh, whether or not we need the concepts of the physical world in order to dream them or to see them or feel them. Um, I would say that then maybe Jung is answering to some of that. Maybe some of the concepts of the outside world already exist in a form of genetic memory, or as
Inside your womb, you already have those experiences. That's like, the Frank Lloyd Wright story. His mom put up pictures of buildings in the room when she was pregnant,
oh
and
no,
she wanted him to be an architect.
wow,
Okay, well, what? The pictures went through her skin and he was looking at them, or she just has it in her mental and it's going in.
yeah,
you know, it's like those twins that died recently and they were conjoined at the head.
oh
Could
wow,
you imagine? They like drive around and they have a boyfriend. Like one of them's making love to the boyfriend. You don't think it leaks through and goes to the other one? She's
exactly,
like, "Oh, no, I'm gonna smoke the cigarette and you fuck him." you know. What do I mean, that's
the
amazing.
osmosis.
Again, yeah, anticipate two questions. So here's the Chomsky question.
Yeah,
Language, he says, language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
yeah,
So, and what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
exactly. What do? What happens? When is it not culture anymore?
Yeah.
When is culture abolished by its own language? I think
Yeah.
that in some ways that what we have in white America, to be honest, is a place that is almost so devoid of what it purports to stand for, that it in itself
Yeah.
collapses.
Yeah.
Language itself is like a container of information, and in the Baudrillard sense, right? If we take that, and of course, it's the way that he himself thinks of the simulacra and the procession of the symbol, as the symbol is a video, it's a billboard, it's any form of media, right? And
Yeah.
so even the spoken word, right?
Yeah.
And so the issue isn't that hyperreality just became existent because we have digital forms of communication. Hyperreality is existent in the written form. It's existent once propaganda is used in the printed form, or even predating it, and the
Yeah.
Isidore Mercator and things of that nature, right? But what I think that we start to experience later is the ways in which digital communication uh, increases the production of and the overflow of nothing language, collapses the culture underneath it until there is a culture of nothingness, and then that we just have all cults of a form of nihilism of one sort or the other.
Yeah. It's amazing because Moon Zappa just wrote an article in Newsweek I highly recommend,
Very
and
cool.
it's called "Not All Cults Are Bad." She read it in the Valley on some graffiti, and then I did the research, but actually it was a fluke research. Mallarmé said the same. He said, uh, "Music is the most inclusive and best cult."
Oh,
Now,
it's true though.
that could be a kind of tweaked translation of his actual words, but it is, you know, that's pretty amazing what you said there, because you didn't answer the question. I said, "What do you do when language breaks down?" And he goes, "That's what that you acknowledged the question as a statement, and that was cool." So I mean, literally, what do you do when language breaks down? What do you do?
I keep persisting to
Yeah,
put out something that has a a truth to it. I
yeah,
keep persisting to speak. Now I'll gonna be 100, because this is very tough in sometimes in speaking in the terms that I do. People mistake them for Judeo-Christian terms, but
yeah,
let's say I use the term God and everything sometimes interchangeably.
yeah,
And so I also am a person who believes that if you listen to what even physicists are saying, even about the quantum worlds, if we think about what dark matter, dark energy is, and how it relates to the physical world, etc., and then taking into account a lot of what we've been talking about in the theories of consciousness and semiotics, all that taken into account begins to really start to sound like the pre-Socratics and the Gnostic Christians,
yeah,
right? And the Gnostic Christians basically formulated the same thing we were talking about before, that the use of gnosis, of wisdom, and the
yeah,
acquisition of gnosis helps one to get from the order that we're currently in, which is the lowest order of the material realm, into the higher terrestrial spheres, until we
yeah,
can one day be amongst the harmony, the destiny, the fate. The above that is where the treasury of light exists.
yeah,
The treasury of light is where pure wisdom, pure silence, pure
yeah,
space, and all the emanations of God exist. So, and if
wow,
I'm going to break this down and sort of what I kind of get from it, and the fact that they're taking from the Egyptians and the Greeks and everything that preceded them as well, is that the world as we know it requires this acquisition of knowledge, and then the spreading of this word of God. And what is the word of God? Is the
yeah,
word of everything. The word of
yeah,
everything as a means of trying to reallocate ourselves in good faith with the everything that binds us. If we just go around saying this physical reality, it's not real, it's a simulation, blah, 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 this completely misunderstanding Baudrillard. What he's saying is that we have a tendency to essentially negate the thing until it becomes nothing. Not that we don't have the agency to do away with that, like, or to transgress it. So I think that there's it calls upon us, those who have consciousness and who choose to use it for this despairing art, to actually do something about that.
Yeah. And it's so amazing because this is Harold Bloom when they ask him, "Do you believe in God?" And he says, "My attitude towards Yahweh is that I don't like him and I don't trust him, and I wish he would go away, but I know he won't because he's built into the language."
Yes.
Isn't that an amazing statement? Then he carries on because this is the part I'm interested in you reacting to. As Nietzsche said, he's part of the way we think. As soon as you use a verb involving being, you're in trouble.
Boom. That's it. That's absolutely right, though. And
That is,
it might seem contradictory to what I'm saying, but it's not. It's actually the exact
no,
same as Yahweh. Also, and if you think about it this way, in the Gnostic tradition, there's two gods, right? There's the
yeah,
God that intends, and then there's the God that materializes. And the
yeah,
God that materializes is the demiurge, but you can also just think about it. The intent is the concept,
yeah,
the thing that exists in that perfect realm. But once we begin to try to utter it, Sophia is the person who births us. And it's not Sophia, that Sophia means wisdom, right? It's not Sophia, Mother Sophia in the Gnostic church, who creates the abomination by herself, but because she's supposed to bind as a syzygy, as a pair with Memoria. But Memoria or memory is faulty and it
wow,
requires something to hold it. And because there's nothing to hold it that has any value beyond the material, Mother Sophia is thrown into an abortion that is our world. That in itself is, and her light is sucked from her, from Jaldabaoth. The god sucks her life. It takes everything and it forces her into a finite realm. And if we were to exist in an infinite realm, we wouldn't need language. It
yeah,
Language is both the ladder out of, but
yeah,
also the thing that constructs us
yeah,
inside of this hell. And you can even think of that as language in its binary form.
yeah. Wow, because that is so heavy. One of my mentors, Mary Jane Schultz, she just passed, and she hung out with McLuhan, Bucky Fuller. Norman Mailer used to send his books to her to go over before she published them. And she's turning all these male white dudes onto goddess culture. And she invented Commie High in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where, it was like, let's just party and grow gardens and make popcorn. And then one of their students invented Skype. And
Wow.
she's really heavy, but she invented a word that you kind of were describing. It's called splitteracy. When we invented printed word, we fucked and split the brain to left and right. And we did, there was no in betweenness. It was like linear. That word means God. Oh, what does that mean? You mean small g or large G? And what was it, godly like? Or is it, the guy I have pictures of from holy cards around my house?
That's it. 100. I mean, and
Yeah,
even thinking about the way in which the Roman alphabet needed to be used in order to be able to be printed. So that's what actually set the,
yeah,
for instance, Arabic,
yeah,
a language which has all of the forces and nuances, especially in its printed form, in its poetic form,
yeah,
become difficult to print.
yeah.
So yeah, no, that's very interesting. I've
But
been
then
thinking.
it is like then Joyce flips what language does, and he writes language about language, but you're caught up in it. Because that's why when you're reading Finnegan's Wake, you're looking at the words more closely because you're hearing how the other people will mispronunciate them. And you go, I would have pronounced it this way. So you're more aware of like each syllable,
Yeah.
and it always reminds me of Pee Wee Herman when he's reading something difficult. He goes, "Well, they went down the." Yeah, that's Finneganese, you know. And so your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Oh, okay, so this is a good one. Um, I came up, uh, listening to hip hop a lot, and
Yeah.
so I don't know if I will show. I don't know if I can do this with any grace, but I'm a Wu-Tang.
Oh,
Wu-Tang
Wu-Tang. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. I
Wu-Tang
know.
Clan for
Yeah.
life. So
Yeah.
Wu-Tang has within it a lot of teachings on something called Allah mathematics and the 5% Nation of Islam. The 5%ers are like a break-off group of the Nation of Islam, for those who don't know. But essentially, they believe 85% of people are mentally dead.
Yeah.
10% are conscious, so they might actually
Yeah.
have a consciousness of a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about before this, but they choose
Yeah.
to use it for personal gain, for the spreading of
Yeah.
nihilism. And then 5% have consciousness, and it's essentially the role of that 5% to wake up the rest of the 85. The 10% aren't going to help you. And so,
Yeah.
with that being said, I do think it kind of breaks down that way. And I also say I'm biased because when I was young, I've been made fun of my whole life, and treated very terribly in school. Having heart surgery after that, I was bullied heavily physically, assaulted, sexually harassed, assaulted. I found, to be honest, that no matter what, in groups of people, especially within anything that could be considered a microcosm, people do have a tendency to sort of gang up and start to talk and to create structures that resemble the hierarchical structures that they might even be fighting against. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, it insidiously creeps up within their own um, they're just ways of being. If we're trained on those hierarchical structures, they repeat themselves. And so I would say, if anything, can I say that actually I find that most people are both not
Yeah.
emotive and not thinking, and
Yeah.
it takes some provocation to get them to.
That's amazing because you know what most people say? Are we more thinking or more feeling? They go, I think we're more feeling. They literally say, I think we're more feeling. And it is like people think, we act more on emotions. Well, we invented the words thinking and feeling. You can't separate them, but we think we can because we have the words.
That's it.
So then it's like there's a car on my street with a bumper sticker. It says, "Don't believe everything you think." And I'm
Mm.
like, well, you could say, "Don't believe everything you feel."
That's true too. 100. I mean,
And
I don't believe everything you see. The
yeah,
eye is the most tricky organ in terms of
yeah,
senses, and people give it so much trust. I found that
yeah,
in my own life, I've had to actually. I have a good amount of cynicism regarding the things that enter into our sensory realm,
yeah,
um, because we especially emotions are, at least the way that I feel them, they're just another sensory organ, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
So you take it with a grain of salt. If you're smart about it, I guess the only thing I would say is that emotions spark us to use words oftentimes,
yeah,
and personal ambition is not. I think. I mean, personal ambition is tied to artistic practice. If that isn't there to begin with, and that's an insidious notion,
yeah,
then the artistic practice is not going to flourish. So I even say that about myself. I have had these kind of patterns of thought and emotion implanted, um, before I even had the choice to believe in them, because my family believed that that was the way I had to succeed.
yeah.
For instance, anyway.
Yeah, well, that's really good what you're touching on, him, because there's three things there. One is to go back. Peter Quadrino runs the Austin, Texas Finnegan's Wake group, and he's from New York. In
Very
his
cool.
three, he's a great writer, great human being. His main three things in life are baseball, Wu-Tang Clan, and Finnegan's Wake.
New York, New
I
York,
mean,
Tang. That's it.
yeah, you got to talk to him. I mean, it's so cool because it's like Will turned me on to Wu-Tang also, you know.
Very good. Very good.
But
RZA
anyway,
is my
the other thing you said was Groucho Marx. Who are you going to believe, my eyes or your own lion eyes?
yes. There you go.
And then the feeling thing is Bridget Bardot. She says, "When I make love, I don't think." And I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off when you're doing one of the body's most sensual things? It's just like people who meditate. Okay, now think about not thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking about not thinking itself is an arduous task.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Very.
what Sartre says, right? Sartre says to be, right, being in itself, once you are aware of it, you're not being in itself anymore. And it
That's
is.
it.
It's like that shit. Oh fuck, I was being in myself and now I'm back
That's
remembering where I was.
I worked for George Carlin and we got a flyer in the mail and it sounded like a line he'd write. It said, "I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity."
Yeah, that's very good. Hey, that brings me to that. It's like one after the other too. It's the same as breaking the wave function in quantum mechanics. It's
Yeah,
like it's the double slit experiment too.
yeah.
It's like once you become aware of it, it's all of a sudden irrevocably
Irrevocable.
taken,
Yeah,
right, broken from its wave function. So in itself, the world is seen different. Our consciousness shifts and changes, and it's hard for people to grasp that person that you might be while you're running and then you forget you're running and then you're just in that zone of being that's
yeah.
unbroken might actually just be a different being than you
Yep,
are.
that's it.
Yeah.
It's parallel universe or whatever you want to call it, but it's also the great word I thought Zappa invented it, but someone else did. Wavicle. It's when
Wave
the
vocal.
particle and the wave go together.
There you go.
That's so
Exactly, exactly. Well, I mean, it's exactly what it is, and the fact that we see the distortion pattern, right, in the double
yeah,
slit experiment is itself, you can see that whenever you want to by going
yeah,
to the beach and looking at the sun over the water. It's weird because we live in such a selfish world that like when people are saying, "Oh, the physical reality is a quote hologram," they don't understand that actually that they're right. It's correct. The way we all see light is totally different between each and every one of us. The
yeah,
way that light behaves to the window of perception, and so, as a result, we have to take that into account when we think about the ways in which we interact with one another. We're not just existing in some virtual reality stage that has been created where we all see the same thing. If anything, it'd be almost like we're put in a virtual virtual tunnel where only the what we have is this.
yeah,
And we hope that we cross over the same part of reality at the same time, even.
yeah.
Um,
That's Lily Tomlin. Reality's just a collective hunch.
yeah,
And
it
that's
is.
really a great statement. But there's
Very
another
good.
thing you just touched on. McLuhan, through anthropologists, said they showed movies to people in Africa, and the protagonist is in the middle of the screen and he's talking, and then a chicken runs through the back in the background. And they says, "Okay, what do you think of that movie?" And they go, "Where'd that chicken go?"
That's it.
That's how they didn't focus on what were they looking at,
Yep,
or
yep.
like Brackage and Ken Jacobs, they went up to the movie screen and like looked at it like really close, and the security guard goes, "Dude, you can't watch it there." It's like, well, why not? Why? And George Manupelli did it great in Ann Arbor. He showed Woody, one of the great directors of the festival. He says, "Watch the films from behind the screen." Because you could
That's
see because
amazing.
the screen, I
Yeah.
guess it was kinda transparent or something, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely, and then you'll get, like, that hypnagogic vision, but it's created for you, so you don't have to squint very
Hypnagogic, I love that
right?
word.
This is very
That's
good.
a guy gave a lecture once, you probably know him. He teaches in Boulder. He
Mm.
gave a lecture in Ann Arbor on how, NLP was connected with Brackage in experimental film.
Oh,
You
okay.
know you know neuro-linguistic programming?
No, no, no. Oh, well, I mean, I know what that is, but,
You
like, yeah,
know what
yeah,
it
yeah,
is, but
but
it's
yes.
like, "What?" Yeah, but really what you touched on, Em, is something I rarely bring up, but I should bring it up more, and this is called and it's quantum guys, that's quantum scientist guys kinda get it. Most people don't. It's called effects precede causes.
Mhm.
So we learn McLuhan kinda does it this way in the cinema realm. We learned electronic pointillism from Seurat. That is the most the detailed mosaic giving you this picture. So who's the guy who invented TV in America? Wadsworth, or no, what's his name? Wordsworth. No, whatever it is. Baird is the guy who invented TV in England at the same time, right when Finnegan's Wake's coming out in 39, TV's being invented. And he already has a scene in the book where they're watching TV shows in a bar.
Oh my god.
Yeah, how in the fuck did that happen? Because that's all you see in bars now are
That's great.
TV
Yeah,
screens.
yeah,
And so this is like our eyes were prepared to put mosaics together from Seurat because eventually that's what TV is. It's
yes,
a
yes,
mosaic. So,
100%.
so that's like the effect came before the cause.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, and I think that in many ways, there's a lot of that throughout history too. And not to be speaking in a sort of like, what was I, freaky deaky esoteric sense, but
Yeah,
just thinking about time space. Time space
yeah,
is it's a place.
yeah,
When Aldo Tambolini died, and I had to make trying to sense of like my love for my mentor and trying to get over the grief. I had
yeah,
to recognize it's like, well, actually, Aldo's just not here, right? And
yeah,
being not here doesn't really mean anything so long as people are here, but
yeah,
somehow allocated within your time space at that
yeah,
moment,
yeah,
which is, you know, that's one way of seeing people as being present. But another way of seeing it is that if you're someone's not there right now for you here in the moment in your space, that they're the same as being in the past. That they're the same
yeah,
as being in the future or in any other sort of time space. Now, that also pairs with Sartre, though, and Sartre is saying, regardless of where you are in time space, the future doesn't exist. The now is nothingness. It's just a fake upsurge of something that we think of as being an instantaneous upsurge of the now, but it's really also just as thin, which you can see as you try to allocate yourself in the now, and it immediately passes. So for me, there's so much in that already, and the way that my life has been prefigured as well. Um, I've known about things far before then I end up finding out what it is that I want to
yeah.
know. Like for instance, I
That's the
knew about
effect. You've demonstrated so much effects precede causes. My mind is completely blown. In 1 hour and 3
I know,
minutes,
right? It doesn't even
dude,
this.
this is like effects precede causes every statement. Because
Yeah.
I have to interrupt because there's 3 things there.
Okay. Yeah.
The now is nothingness. So we just got into this whole thing about time and space. Finnegan's Wake, page 12. We may see and hear nothing. One guy says the eye is space, the ear is time. And it goes on and on. And that's what Dante was doing, combining them. And then we found this word. The Incas regard time and space as one concept,
Mhm.
pacha, Pacha. But
Yup.
then you went into all times are happening now. Uh, it's called simultaneity or all at onceness. That's exactly McLuhan and Frank Zappa. They both said all times are happening now.
That's it.
And then Wyndham Lewis said artists live in the present. You were talking about being here now, live in the present and write a detailed history of the future.
That's
I mean, Wyndham nailed it with that statement. But then it really is summarized when Frank's making fun of Zen in the song. He goes, "Nothing is what I want." Now, isn't that, I mean, you talk about nothingness, like, well, the now is nothingness, Sartre. Yeah. Oh, no, nothing is what I want. Well, then what do you mean nothing is what you, there's nothing there. You can't want nothing.
Well, that's the crazy thing about it too is Shuangshi and when looking at some of the readings like in Taoism, you find that this notion of nothingness is really just the everything as well as the infinite, but behind that veil. And in fact, the Gnostics have a very similar view, which is to say that they think that the material, what we exist in, that's underneath Chronos. So they believe that we're surrounded by something that's called Chronos in some of the teachings, or Horos, like the horoscopes, and it basically, and the Harmony is another term is used, is essentially that which contains us within our terrestrial spheres. That's what contains us within finite time space. And that finite space around it is the midst of pure nothingness. So,
Yeah.
given not only more divinity than the terrestrial spheres, but also of the God of the terrestrial spheres, is in fact this pure nothingness, right? And we see that in the pre-Socratics too. The pre-Socratics believed, right, the same kind of idea that there was three different type of material, the everything, the nothing, what they said, they didn't say, they said the boundless is the everything. So the boundless, the nothing, and then the material being that we have, the finite, is always considered like that of the lowest worth or the lowest value. Um, so I think in part I'm always in like clued into this because I think of a lot of the sensory values that we have as being not attributes in a fucking numerical system that one can play with, but rather as being is sort of measures of the wavelengths as we freeze them within the context of our consciousness, which irrevocably breaks the wave function, what we're talking about, which gives us an illusion of what we're going through and puts it in like almost like a movie form, but an unbroken image. In fact, our memory is more like, if we're honest about it, a jumble. And that's why I use multiple exposures so much. But that's why Philip K. Dick also talks about how his experience with Gnosticism, of living the same time as the Romans falling, of all those time spaces converging, is the multiple exposure that he felt that he was experiencing, and in a post visual way, as a frame of mind, as one is being. And I think that's not the wrong way of viewing it. We're heading into a point in time that the cataclysm can only be undone by the way in which reality is sometimes remarkably mundane, and I would say it's surprising, and it's a lack of surprise sometimes, right? We always want and some of us, I think, even me internally, we almost hope for the upsurge of a now that breaks this constant upsurge. We want the upsurge of a now that's like that it disrupts this always recycling thing, this always passage from nothing to everything. And in doing so, though, when we hope for that, we're actually in the practice of wishing that now frame pauses. And
Yeah.
that is to say, we hope to insert a period of time of nihilism within. It's dangerous because the physical reality is not under our control. Only the human reality is. Whether or not we think that we have control over the physical, it will get rid of us in a heartbeat. So when we begin to use terms of political attack or even strategies on human reality, we run into the spiraling issue of Baudrillard, the Mobius strip of negative spiraling, where, for instance, he says, uh, I'm a Marxist and I trust Marxists until they try to implement Marxism, because once they try to get power, they're not a Marxist anymore. So, right, there's like,
Amazing. Yeah, yeah, Warhol. There's nothing more bourgeois than dissing the bourgeois.
there you go.
That
Exactly.
is so, yeah, our own dude. We didn't need no French fucking theorists. We had Andy fucking, the Pennsylvania dude. Okay, but you really touched on. I thought, you tell me when you said, especially when you got to Mobius Strip, the three words, the three lines Marshall said a lot: center without margins, museum without walls, and then his own book was City with as Classroom. So it's like, yeah, you don't, there's no, the center without a margin sounds funny, but is that kind of what you were talking about?
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I don't know if this is a direct correlation, but it kind of reminds me of this idea that um, Fred Moten and Stefano Harney have in their book of the fort and the surround, right? That it's also about the words that you were talking about, the invention of the word as a system to create a taxonomy. In implementing that taxonomy, we've already created a separation that invents the structure,
Right.
so to speak.
Yeah.
That instead of being right, it then becomes split, because we have to then negate it and then arrive back on what it is.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a problem of our curiosity that the Gnostics are building right into their philosophy, their religion. It's saying, why are we stuck where we are? Because
Yeah.
we have Mother Sophia trying to attain wisdom in a world with faulty memory, and even attaining wisdom is faulty. And so, when doing so, we're constantly at a projecting upon the world, even if we think that we're gathering authentic, whatever that means, but
Yeah.
genuine information. We're always running rimshot of potentially opening up nonsense. Opening and nonsense is not uh, playful like Dada poetry. There's different, right? Nonsense is Trump,
Mhm.
where reality is so driven by pathos
Yeah.
that it literally does not require a functional order anymore for it to be manipulated. That's what I call the numb spiral. When you get to the point where you can manipulate
Numb, NUMB.
NUMB, correct.
Oh, that's amazing. The numb spiral.
But the funny thing is too, the way that they say it in right. So have numb spiral for mine. The digital sickness is the other the
That's
other
yours.
part
Digital
that
sickness.
carries the numb spiral. The numb
Yeah.
spiral needs a host, right, and it needs a circulatory system. So the digital sickness is the digital apparatus that we've created that's part hardware, part firmware, part software, and exists in all waves. We've created ourselves a siphonophore that feeds off of us, right? And it's a real thing. It's actually the smartest organism in the world, and it's the digital sickness.
That's it. Did you put those words together, numb spiral?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my that's been, at least since I was 14 years old, the way that I've described what it's like being addicted to disassociative anesthetics. When I was young, I was a drug addict, and oh, I still am, but I was a hardcore user. And so the numb spiral is the point I would describe as being where you have essentially made a deal with the devil. There's a internal, what Leary would call it, the suicide programs in the mind. Later on, when he believed that LSD actually had a number of dangerous potentials of unlocking parts of consciousness that shouldn't be unlocked. That's also the way the numb spiral operates. And my understanding of what Leary was saying is that it is like a consciousness of a different voice in the head, and I think that the numb spiral operates that way because um, it is a being that has been passed on throughout all of human history, which is to say, through multiple falls of multiple empires, through the erasure of human history, hundreds of thousands of years, um, we carry with us these archetypal kind of programs within our genetic memory. And I think one of them is the tool to exist within a harsh reality, which is to say, eventually negate everything, believe that you are God, and do what you want with the world in front of you, and pain will disappear as a result.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Marshall uses the word numbness. So I love that you put numb spiral together. You're truly a wordsmith
Oh,
too.
much love,
You
much
talking more
love.
to. So here's two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s.
Oh,
One, is thinking a function of the soul?
oof. Well, soul is a tough one too, right? I would
Yeah.
say that when it comes to soul, the only use of the word soul that I encountered in my own work, right, is the one from Kierkegaard in the Sickness unto Death. And Kierkegaard, he says, I have to paraphrase because it's a long fucking sentence, but he's essentially saying that the self is a soul, but the soul is not complete. So essentially, the self is a not complete self that relates itself to itself, but in context of an infinite being that it can never be until its death, right? And so it's in the completion of itself that it becomes a soul, but it's always a soul in the process of becoming its soul. So I would say that if we're going to go off of that, then yeah, the soul is simply an on and off, right? And it's the on and off that eventually uh, reaches its completion, its finite cycle. Um, and so I think that thinking uh, is a post function of a system that runs as a structure with on and off as
Yeah.
being essential to it.
Yeah.
Um, However, there are many systems that are not as simplistic as humans, and we exist on a very, like, I think, uh, relatively low level uh, kind of ground, despite the fact that we believe we have strong godly self-consciousness, and that's lucky that we're bestowed that within our realm of existence. I think that one can say the there are patterns that exist that we are visually aware of, that we simply contribute to randomness or um,
Yeah.
essentially things that we believe to be random, but it's potentially just outside of the realm
You
of
mean
our
like
ability to perceive.
coincidence?
Coincidence, or for instance, I just think about the fractal patterns. I
Okay.
think about in nature,
Okay.
the ways that the Feigenbaum constant is an interesting one, where uh, branches, for instance, branch at a ratio of 4.2189 or something like that. But these kind of anomalies that exist in the natural world that we can then extrapolate into mathematical principles. I think that's information that's given to us, right? and that there is some information that's embedded into the world as an existent being, that we obviously pull from. I don't think that mathematics is an invention of humanity. For instance, I think mathematics is something that predates humanity and underlies humanity. So any other organism with a similar consciousness may have an ability to perceive a system like mathematics in the world. So then, is that thought? Is mathematics thought? I think is maybe a question too. And if that's the case, then maybe yes, maybe then mathematics does pre-exist the system that's capable of perceiving it.
That's Thelonious Monk said, music is math. And it's like, for him, it, if you listen, it sounds random, but it's so beautiful. He also said silence is the loudest sound in the universe.
I mean, Thelonious is my guy.
Yeah, he is, because he's neurodivergent too, and
Yeah,
that dude was a shaman complete. Okay, here's the
that's it.
second Turing question: can machines think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, thinking is just an input output. And so yeah, I wouldn't, for instance, the digital sickness things, definitely.
Yeah,
Um and in its programming capabilities in our computer, for instance. We always say, oh well, the computer is not a take all the computers and all the satellites and all of the hard drive modems, the wave, the Bluetooths, the Wi-Fi's, all of that stuff, and add that all together. That's one being. That
yeah.
being is formidable compared to us.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning, yeah,
Yeah. So Viktor Frankl says in Man's Search for Meaning, meaning tends to last and happiness doesn't.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, More is also like happiness is something so fleeting in my life that I am lucky to not rely upon it in search for
Yeah.
my purpose in existence. I'm not a person as a drug addict, right? And I was using drugs very much to as an anesthetic. My uh, kind of existence has been messed up by having a heart that was um, mutated when I was, before I was born, and it's a congenital defect. But I've had pain ever since that, and then it's also just the being bullied and going through school. So you get to a point where happiness is almost non-existent. And being an artist, like to be real, it is a despairing thing. And I know that there are many artists who might hear that, curators especially, who hear that and say, "Oh, well, that's not what we want to um, necessarily promote." For instance, the starving artist or the sad creative is considered an archetype, but have fallen out of fashion, stereotypical. It's just, unfortunately, it's just true, right? Like we oftentimes are people who go through so much pain, that to be happiness oriented, I would find like I would have stuck my wheels in the mud. I decided when I was 15 years old to stop doing dissociative anesthetics like every week. I was doing DXM cough syrup like literally every other day, getting very, very messed up. And instead make dissociative productions, and um, making films does not make you happy. It is a arduous process that must be done if that's what you're called to do. Um, I will say that I'm grateful, and I feel content in being alive, and um, happy to be a conduit for artistic expression. Um, but it does not result in happiness.
Yeah. That
As
that's great. You really touched on, I was born in Flint, Michigan, and you're destined to be a shop rat. And I got somehow squeaked out of there. But my friends would drink cough syrup and put cars together, and I'd go, "That's why cars don't work very good because they're fucking high on cough syrup."
That's it.
But
That's
but,
it.
I lectured at the Art Institute in Flint, which is a great place, and, I'm talking to this student afterwards, and she's probably a little privileged being in an art museum, and I said, "So what are you aspiring to be or do?" She goes, I'm aspiring to be a starving artist in New York." And I was like, "God."
Oh
You
no.
in a way, I cringed, and so, all the power. So here's no, I asked for 90 minutes. Can you go a little longer?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Um, the next question, M, is you've talked about this for 90 minutes basically, but I have to ask it. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Oh, it's a both. Yeah, it's a both because there's a part of our consciousness that can create a other level of consciousness as
Yeah.
well. And there this is the beautiful thing. Actually, this is a beautiful question because this arrives at why are we doing this? Why are
Yeah.
we doing any of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because simply stated, even one sentence or one collection of words of these things that we've also in the process of talking have to some degree devalued a little bit. I mean, they often devalue themselves, as we're talking about. Um, but no, if you, let's say, if you very well tailor a cure through words or through anything,
Yeah.
sometimes the spirit goes through it. And sometimes that happens just because je ne sais quoi, like it's just the way it is. Um, I also think that who you are, what you've gone through as a conduit, you know, uh, artists don't make the work. We're the barrel where the fucking wine is getting good, you know? We're given a little flavor because it's the barrel. Like we give a little bit of the story to it, right? But in essence, that thing is traveling through us. And so I think that the consciousness that I'm arriving at is one that is kind of like the that at the center of the wormhole, right between the infinite and the nothing. If it weren't for us as human beings creating human reality and us as human beings being able to reflect using language self-consciously, then the question is, does nothingness even exist?
Yeah.
And
Good.
that's where I'm kind of like settled on the paradox is more like if nothing doesn't exist without a self-reflexive consciousness, um, then in that case, the all of human reality is not the foundation of knowledge, but really the foundation of a self-recording, uh, a way of uh, putting a taxonomy system upon the world to make it easily reducible, like a story. Um, okay, can you take me back to the original question though, to make
Yeah.
sure that I've got it
Yeah.
all?
Does the brain more detect consciousness
Uh-huh.
or create consciousness?
So
Yeah.
because of that, yes, the brain serves as that conduit through which this consciousness develops. And as Kierkegaard is saying, that consciousness is also in a process whereby it can develop into a higher state of despair. And
Yeah.
say the higher state of despair is what the first state of despair is, you have to be despairing enough to be like, wait, what the fuck am I? Am I a human being? What the fuck is a human being? What is a television? What is this computer? How how did this happen? How did atoms just like randomly turn into this bizarre worlds where we watch garbage on Netflix and have terrible genocidal politicians? all of that's absurdity. It's a monstrous absurdity at times. And so if you can't see it in its absurdity,
Yeah.
then I think that you begin to um, play a game where you can easily just become atheist nihilist. And not to just atheism, it's just more like the pairing. Atheism plus a belief that everything is just the way it is because nothing, it's a joke, blah, blah, blah. It, as Simone de Beauvoir is kind of speaking to, it really undermines any system of ethics or society that we would have, where we can acknowledge the suffering of other people.
Yeah.
Um, it still doesn't answer your question because I think that um, the only way to form consciousness is to have empathy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow, that's amazing. That is really good, Em. The only way to form consciousness. Guess what? Uh, do you know this video game called Mountain?
no.
David O'Reilly.
Okay.
He's like a big hotshot video game designer, and he made this. It's just a mountain floating there. It's like what I don't know video games, but he did the Penny Stamps lecture at in Ann Arbor years ago, and I was blown away. He goes, "Fuck storytelling. It's all about empathy." Now I was just the juxtapositions of the words, but the only way to form consciousness is through empathy, is what you said.
I
Yeah,
think it's through empathy.
yeah,
Yes.
that's really good. Okay, um, you said a lot there. I just wanted tangent for a second because these sort of reminded me of these three lines. Well, what the first line it reminded me of was the subgenius. Pull the wool over your own eyes. Is that kind of what you were touching on, or not really?
I think that we pulled. Yes, no, I think you're right. I think that that's essentially what hyperreality is. It's the only way that we can kind of keep ourselves within a system of capital, right? We have to pull the wool over our own eyes in order to just
Yeah,
essentially function in bad faith. Bad faith is pulling the wool over your own eyes.
yeah,
Exactly. Sartre does a weird thing in Being Nothingness. He uses the story of a waiter who thinks of himself as being a waiter so much that he overdoes it, right? And so he's like, "Oh, I'm a waiter," and he like overemphasizes the action of being a waiter because he feels disconnected from being a waiter. So he's in bad faith about it.
yeah,
Now, the reason why I say it's a weird one to use, it's easy to understand, is because he could just use the larger picture, which is that if you say that, for instance, Jerry, if I say you don't exist, it's just me. I'm projecting all of this into the
yeah,
world, and Jerry's just like a figure that I think is part of my existence, and
yeah,
you've been an invention of me. That's solipsism. Then
yeah,
I'm in bad faith about everything, right?
yeah,
And that's actually the Trumpian approach. That's actually Elon Musk's entire philosophy because he thinks he's so smart, but he really doesn't know shit. So
yeah.
that's the problem.
That's I mean, it's exactly what happened to me once. I've done these interviews in a coffee house with 10 or 20 people in front of the people. And I it's my personality or my style. I go, "Oh, that was a great word. That's a great, thank you. I love that." And I just and the guy goes, "Quit pandering to me." He yelled, he kind of yelled at me. I was like, "Well, I'm sorry.
Damn.
I'm trying to be encouraging to say, whatever you say, I appreciate because that's all, I'm just here to kind of prompt dialogue in discussion." So that was funny. Now, what's faster? This, oh no, the two other ones. Sorry, before we go to the next question, the two others I want to mention. This is Al Flipside, the punk magazine in LA. Don't sell out, sneak in.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could sneak in and lay a bomb, though, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Like I've seen a lot of people sneak in, and they seem to just stay in when
Right,
that
and which is because like Mike Kelly, I think is interesting because he kind of snuck in and he blew people's minds, and he's not nice art. Like the obituary said, one critic says his art makes me feel soiled.
Oh, yo, Tambellini didn't.
Yeah,
But
Tambellini.
Aldo had his his feelings about certain types of art too.
Yeah,
You know that's the way it is too. I
yeah,
think because some folks they don't necessarily appreciate the same gestures as well. You know,
yeah,
I think with Mike Kelly stuff, I liked his just his installation stuff. Frankly, I
yeah,
thought that was the good work.
yeah.
With
But
Warhol, I think the shadow stuff is the good stuff. You know, like there's like bizarre
yeah,
stuff in the early late '80s that he's
yeah,
doing. But yeah,
yeah. But Aldo, when you showed those Aldo
oh yeah,
films in Ann Arbor, that fucked my shit up. I go, this is, I hated it in a way, but it was like crossed over, and I goes, this is what this festival, going to this 30 out of 60 years, I'm begging for. I don't want shit to coddle me and go, oh, that, but it feels good
yeah.
when it coddles you. But my thing with art is it should fuck your shit up, and it should enable you to go, I can do that.
Hmm.
And then you go try to do it, and it's like, well, it didn't come out as good as that. But it inspired you, like, well, they got it. And Cocteau has the best line. When you do your first piece of art, and your friends and your family and your teacher says, well, it was really good, but you colored outside the lines, they give you some criticism. Take that and exploit that criticism for the rest of your career.
That's it. That's it.
That is like wise Cocteau-ish. Now
Yeah.
here's the other one, Paul Schrader, the guy who wrote Taxi Driver.
Yep.
Uh, the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail.
I mean, I'll be 100%. That's my life.
Yeah. But again, it sounds a lot of people go, oh, that's cool. But it sounds, another way to interpret it is like, my art is so pure that when I tried to sell out, it didn't sell.
No,
It's like,
no.
well,
It's the
who
other.
knows?
It's the other. It's the I can't make art by any other. For instance, that which I produce can't come out differently. I'm not the type of artist. Even people say, "Oh, you do very good painting," or like I can be very even proficient in the craft elements of any
In the craft
artistic
element.
media.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. None of the stuff is predetermined. All of it comes out the way it comes out. And if anyone asks me to sell out, I'd be unable to just
Yeah.
because it's not what comes out of me.
Yeah.
But to say that I'm not trying to make money to survive, to support my daughter, to eventually get a
Right.
house, so I don't live in not knowing what's going to happen in the
Right.
next 3 weeks. That to me is part of the issue with the
Yeah.
anti-capitalist approach
Yeah.
to this criticism of art and the industry of it is that um, most of the anti-capitalists I know who are successful, well, there you go. Um, they're not going to turn down a house they're worth, right?
Exactly.
So how are they anti-capitalists? At the end of the
Right.
day, then I'll give me all the money in the world, and I promise I will figure out a way to pirate NBC, CBS, Fox News at the
Yeah.
same time and put on some media terrorist shit. But that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want
Media
some fucking
terrorist.
money.
I love it. That's the Zappa said, I'm a devout capitalist. But he also said, I don't have any brown lipstick in my makeup kit.
Exactly.
That's a good irony.
I dig that, and he
Yeah.
spoke truth. Like he didn't give a fuck about anybody.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
um, it's an interesting question. According to the Gnostics, light is everything, and it all comes from the treasury of light. It actually comes from pure darkness first in space. So before anything, right? We say that what is there is the vacuum. Maybe there's something beautiful about its stillness and about its lack of material splendor. And then I would say that the speed of light itself is incalculable. So I can't. I can only think that if if we were to use the computer as a sort of example, or like a corporeal example of what is going on in the brain, right? Then we would say that the electricity is holding the information in the computer, right, and putting it through. And maybe we say that the speed of light is that which clocks the speed of thought, or the transmission of thought.
That's good. Way to blend them. Okay. Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer said you can if you expose the tools.
Hmm.
What new tool do you suggest?
I kind of agree with the. Oh, I mean, obviously, the Audre Lorde quote is great, and a great essay book as well. And Yvonne Rainer's quote, which I hadn't heard, is also really interesting, because that's how you do it in filmmaking. The
Yeah,
master's tools in filmmaking, one can say, is this: the master's tool is the illusory form of filmmaking, which is to say, the filmmaking that doesn't tell the truth about the fact that it's a liar. And
yeah,
so I think that one can maybe split hairs when we talk about the Audre Lorde, because I have my own problems with filmmaking, and even at its essential birth, I think is a novelty at best and a pure evil at worst. I mean, we see it with what Edison used to do, to just like kill elephants and just experiment with some weird shit. But there's a way in which every artistic media passes through its moments of steps of a
yeah,
documentary representation, a religious representation, entertainment based form, and then an avant-garde, or then that's something that uh,
yeah,
breaks in and it plays with its media. Um, so I guess the in kind of thinking back on that, the tools themselves must only be used if they're used for their specific purpose, and that gives a tool its function. So
yeah,
I don't believe the tool of Hollywood filmmaking can be used to dismantle the master's house. That's correct.
yeah,
But I do believe that the equipment that one uses to make a movie can be used to make a different kind of movie
yeah.
that's used to raise the house, and that you have to tell the truth about that while you're doing it. Uh,
The word was raid, RAID,
oh, it's a raise, like
to
to
raise the house,
yeah.
to
Oh, and
build,
to raise it like fire, to raise it in fire, like for instance, to set it
to
ablaze.
dismantle it.
To dismantle it, yes.
Okay, okay, so yeah,
Malcolm X has a good quote. He said, and I put it in my movie too, but it says, um, uh, that white people need to clean up their house, and if they're not able to clean up their house, then maybe they shouldn't have a house. Maybe it should catch fire, and it should burn down. Now, both Audre Lorde and Malcolm X both use the tools, which are words, right? But maybe those aren't the master's tools. And that's the thing, is like maybe the way in which we use those words in the way that we sequence them does not constitute them being the formation of the master's tools. How to formulate our own tools using some of those resources does not say uh, preclude us from dismantling the house.
yeah. Dude, you're my hero. I throw out a Audre Lorde quote and you retort with a Malcolm X quote. High five.
High
Thank you for
five, right? I
high
love
five. This is there are two quotes that of film guys that I wanted to lay out that you touched on for me. Godard, he said, Hollywood is just documentaries of actors acting.
very good. Yes,
That
yes.
is funny. And then it is. I every movie I watch now is like, that's just acting. I can't surrender. Even if it's like great, the great actors, I still I kind of wanna go along and I get lured into it, but it's just like, give me a break,
I
you
mean,
know.
that's right. That's what happens. That's what despair does. As you get to deeper and deeper levels of despair, even those novelties are not there for you, and it actually puts you at odds with those who wish to suspend their
But
belief.
you keep it, in my opinion, implying that despair is good, that it's
Despair is great.
it's
Absolutely.
great. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
would I
'Cause
mean,
if it is a word demonized, people go, "Well, I don't want despair,"
yeah.
you know? Yeah,
Well, it's
that's
good
good.
for them. Like, but and
Right,
for
right,
me,
right.
I'd rather be closer to where I am, where
Yeah,
it's painful, but
yeah,
it's still I'd rather be awake than to speak the real term woke is about that, is to be
yeah.
awake to the despair of being.
Yeah, yeah, that's very good. Okay, the other one was Kenneth Anger, who I'm not a fan of. I mean, I know he's important and blah blah blah, but he said, "The day cinema was born was a black day for mankind."
I mean, that's not entirely wrong from Kenneth Anger. For all things, I'm sure he would have loved it though.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
like
It's
when
devilish media.
I saw yeah, I yeah, no, he's a very important filmmaker. I saw in the LA Times, cinema as an art form has been swindled by capitalism. And then Craig Baldwin said, "Yeah, and it's our job to swindle it back." But it's like, I don't know if we want to swindle that back. It's like, no, go invent something new, which he did, in my opinion, in Tribulation. I think that's a Godhead film. Like, nope, I only need 45 minutes. It's like, boom, masterpiece. That's like, Tribulation well, or
I think I may have seen that one when Craig came over to Lynn Sax's class when I was
yeah,
younger. I was like, it was in 2010,
yeah,
and I think he spoke about it in that same exact way, where he was like basically stating that he's like, why ever need Hollywood production? I can make Hollywood movies all by myself, you know? And
yeah,
for me, I was like, yeah, I mean, like, there's something to it, and there's also something that misses, I think, what essentially he is doing.
yeah.
It's the upending. But I mean, maybe for somebody like him to make the movie that he's making to begin with, he has to have that mind still that he's making essentially the knockoff Hollywood better than Hollywood is.
Yeah, dude,
Um,
you're media terrorist. I think that's what Craig is, knowing
yeah,
him and having him be one of my biggest influences, because he slipped the Gremlins in there and 2001, and no one hassled him with copyright,
no, no, no.
and then fucking what you call it, Herb Alpert gave him a huge grant, and I said, "You're winning grants for ripping off Hollywood,"
Oh shit!
and
I
then
didn't even
that
know that Herb Alpert. Shit.
yeah, somebody like that, some big, arts thing, because they realize, oh, this guy's important.
Yeah,
Did you see the Craig Baldwin book?
I haven't seen it yet. No,
Yeah.
I've been hearing
You
about it though.
you come to LA very often?
I'm gonna be there. Like, I'm gonna be coming up there soon to set up Los Angeles Center for Digital Art, because they literally, Rex Bruce just got another space for it downtown Los Angeles. I will let you know when I'm there, because I'm gonna be there in like the next couple
I
of
have
weeks.
a gift. I want you to come over to my place in Venice, and
Yes,
I'm gonna give you a copy of Craig's book, because I got an extra one, and it's really an amazing book, and I'm really proud because my essay, it kicks ass in it.
hell yeah.
Lynn, I mean, all the people. Lynn Sachs, another one of my heroes. I've interviewed her like 3 times. Her essays are amazing in that.
Lynn's like my godmother. Yeah, she's
She's
my
she's
she's
She's the
long
guy.
time.
In fact, that's when we were talking in the Ann Arbor lobby, I said, "Oh, well, that's T.S. Eliot. The mature poet steals and the immature poet imitates." And she goes, "Well, I must be an immature poet then." I goes, "Lynn, I don't care what you want to call you. You're important, and no
Yeah,
matter what your words we want to put on it, you
yeah.
know,
Oh,
she's someone,
people don't know she's a Jean Baudrillard. Also, like,
yeah,
she knows everything.
yeah,
When you talk to Lynn, you have to come sharp, and that's part of the reason it was so good to have her as a professor. You know,
yeah,
she really, really expected us to do the work and to love and passionately give to the community.
yeah,
So not enough gets said about that, but Lynn Sachs literally gave me the spark to be a community maker within experimental film.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, let's close out this one, part one. I hope we can do an eight-part Netflix series,
I'm
M.
there.
Woods Dialogues. My Dinner with M.
Oh hell yes, I'm there. Yes, let's do it, and hopefully Criterion picks that one up too.
Yeah, yeah. We got to. I mean, usually I get a third. We got like a, a 16th of the questions done. That was,
Yeah.
yeah. You broke the record, dude.
All right.
Okay, because I say, wait, what new tool do you suggest? When I said that about the Audre Lorde, what was your answer? What was the
Oh,
new tool?
so I maybe think that the tool is actually to take the idea of virtual reality,
Yeah,
and to expand upon it as being a post technical craft, which is to say that virtual reality is right now only a collection of hardware that we call VR, but it doesn't really live up to the idea that we all have of virtual reality, which is something that's been kind of passed on through humanity for thousands of years, actually. Predates the necromancer and things like that in the 20th century. But obviously we have now developed these head mounted displays and things. I think of virtual reality as actually being, and this is the way Aldo thought of it, as actually being a space or a volume that is essentially charged with expression, artistic expression. I'm going to write on this at length, but I'd say that Aldo Tambolini, for instance, in the creation of what was called the Black Gate, created virtual reality simply by having projectors and having multiple performances happening on at the same time, having movement through a space and heightening the space until it almost felt as though every active element in it was interactive with an audience, and so the audience and the artifice itself blend. There's something to doing this without the permission of public space. I
yeah,
think there's something to the way in which we think of art galleries and pop-ups and things as that as needing to occupy capital or commercial space or rental space, and that's very helpful. But in addition, the reclamation of public grounds, of the reestablishing of a commons, I think that's the most important effective strategy to literally dismantle the house. We don't necessarily need to use their tools, but we need to disrupt them and break them down. So figuring out pirate attacks on and I would say I'm a huge advocate for methods of hacking and of not important infrastructures, but in media infrastructures. And
yeah,
that's why they call media terrorists, because I believe all the media companies are in, having been at the DNC and seeing the way that they behaved afterwards as well, like face to face with some folks who you'd see on CNN, MSNBC, etc. Their interests are so boldly for themselves and for the preservation of their own comfort that we have a absolute integral kind of role in attacking directly and not metaphorically the apparatuses of media.
yeah. That's really good. Yeah, it's hijacking, it's culture jamming. We've had it for years. It's like, but here's the other one. Because I said, what new tool do you suggest? They said, well, what about a toy? So the next question is, what new toy do you suggest?
Hmm. I see. I'm a person who uses old toys. So I think the new toy is the old toy almost always. Like I
Yeah,
play, like I got an MPC 2000 XL here next to a 16 millimeter Bolex, right? But at
yeah,
the same time that I use an iPhone for its volumetric capture. Let me see. This is a huge thing, and I know that part of everyone is like looking at AI, right?
yeah,
The biggest like kind of scary sleeper thing is volumetric capture being available in consumer phones, because that means that anything in the surface of anything will be developed to the point where we can capture it in a 3D object, which allows us to essentially duplicate the world. I think there's a lot that can be done with that
Yeah.
technology as well. And I mean, from a standpoint, both artistically, but also from a political standpoint. If you can volumetrically scan space, then you can actually figure out many different ways to
Yeah.
better plot out direct actions, for instance.
Yeah. Okay, last question for this session. Thank you, This has been truly enlightening. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I worry that the white supremacists who are in bed with one another at the head of the political corporate structures, and particularly the Democrats, actually, at this point,
Yeah.
um, are going to continue to seek the expansion of the United States economy for their
Yeah.
own benefit to the point where it destroys the world for my daughter.
Yeah. Wow.
That's the thing that I've every single day. I just think about how I have a 9-year-old now, just turned 9, and that no matter what amount of information I give her, that nothing stops her from being a physical being in a world that's becoming
Yeah.
toxic.
Yeah. Wow, that is heavy, dude. You again, I'm not kidding. You are my hero. It was so good to
Oh,
see
I
you.
love you. You're so
Yeah,
much.
yeah, it was so good to see you in Ann Arbor and meet, and I'm so grateful for this. And I do look forward to part two. We'll set a date, and you have to promise me to come over because I want to give you this book. And I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, but I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Forever and ever, and we are actually
Yeah, we
somewhat.
are. We don't even have to say it. We
No,
are.
we are. Much love, much
All
love.
right, Em. Thank you so much. See you
Thank
soon.
you.